Well, good morning, everybody, from Mystery Island, Maryland. I'm John O'Loughlin, and welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff Lives 2. This is my backup channel to my main channel, which is McDuff Lives, which was formerly the backup channel to McDuff Kennedy's Man to Smash the CIA. And it was in that channel that I first encountered the great writer Doug Valentine. I'm so pleased to have Doug with us this morning as a continuation of the memorial service for my father, Thomas F. O'Loughlin Jr., which we began on June the 6th. And Doug has kindly agreed to give us some remarks. I would introduce Doug by saying go to douglasvalentine.com and look at all of his great books, works. He's a poet as well as a nonfiction author and a fiction author. He's written the most important books in my book train on my channel, screamingospreys.com. And I've read portions, if not all of, at least 4 of his books on my show. I can't think of anyone more important to my journey to discover who my father really was and his real history so that we can share the story of my father more broadly than Doug Valentine, whose generosity has been incredible and is a very, very, very genuine, kind man, as well as a fabulous author. So I give you Doug Valentine.
Hi, John. Thanks for inviting me on your tribute to your father. I think that we really have, in a way, not something that's unique. I think most people, especially males, but also women, I've met a lot of women, who really want to know who their fathers were. And not a lot of people get a chance to really have a personal relationship at an adult level with their fathers. I know that your father died very young, and I think you were only in your late teens at the time. So you never had a chance to ask him a lot of questions that you had about things. I was able to talk to my father. We hadn't spoken to each other for 10 years after in my 20s, but by the time I was in my 30s, we started talking. And he told me about how he'd been a prisoner of war in World War II, which I didn't know. And coincidentally, I would later find out that your father was on a naval vessel in the Gulf of Leyte while my father was being liberated in October 1944 from this prison camp. So there was this a general overall philosophical connection between us right from the beginning. And it has to do with who is my father in this world and what kind of a person is he, and how did that shape who I am? And I think this is something that touches everybody in the deepest possible way. Same thing for who's my mother, what kind of person was my mother, but especially with our fathers and our fathers having been involved in covert operations, it was more of a hurdle for both of us to try to discover who our fathers were and how that influenced us and who we were. I remember I didn't know who you were until a couple of years ago. Somebody had written to me on Facebook or an email or something and said, there's a guy reading your book, the Phoenix Program, on YouTube. He's reading it chapter by chapter, and his name is McDuff. And that was interesting to me because my father's name is Valentine, but his actual father was a guy named Garnet Day Spence. And the Spences are Scottish, and they're actually a sect of the Clan McDuff. And I actually went to Scotland and did genealogical research about the Spences and the McDuffs. So when I heard somebody named McDuff was reading my book, The Phoenix Program, I'm very interested. And I reached out to you and found out that although your name wasn't McDuff, we still nevertheless had this sort of spiritual connection through our fathers and the investigations in our own personal investigations into, who is my father in this world and what does it mean? And then later, I don't know exactly how it happened, but we started talking back and forth. And I mentioned that I had a book called TDY. I didn't know much about your father. We hadn't developed that kind of a relationship at that point. But after you read TDY, things really took off, because TDY was a book about Air Force, a military investigation with a bunch of Air Force photojournalists, photo technicians, and video technicians who went into Laos in spring of 1967 to investigate CIA drug trafficking. And I describe the character in the book TDY, which is a fictionalized account of something that actually happened, about an individual who I called Mr. Hammer. Now, everybody in this story was basically had a pseudonym, and I didn't know a lot of anybody's other than the main character who told me the story. And I also gave, at his insistence, a pseudonym to him in the book, but I didn't know who these people were. The guy was involved in a covert operation, and everybody had an alias. And the way the program was set up, everything was compartmented. So I only really knew how this operation unfolded. But there was a character in the book who I called Mr. Hammer, who was a civilian who did the final security check on these Air Force technicians, 4 of them who were going on this covert mission. And you and me, when you read the book TDY, because you had liked the Phoenix program and you liked what I wrote about, you immediately recognized that this person may well have been your father. And this was a revelation to me as well, because I did not know who this person was or what branch of the government he was representing. He was, for my guy, the Air Force photojournalist, he was just a civilian questioning, giving him a security check, asking about who he was. I didn't even know what branch of the government he represented. But once you told me that you suspected that this what might be your father, it opened up a whole new understanding for me that Mr. Hammer, I would say, very likely 99% certainty, represented a branch of the government, the military government, part of the military called the Special Activities, SACSA, SACSA, Special Advisor for Covert and Special Activities, which had been formed in 1962, and it was a branch of the government, the military, to which your father had been assigned, I believe, at the time that it was formed. And he was an FBI agent who obviously would dress in civilian clothes and provided security. Well, on behalf of the FBI, was making sure that nobody who shouldn't be involved in covert activities was being recruited for jobs with this very classified and high-level organization within the military called SACSA, Special Assistant for Covert and Special Activities. And once that happened, my understanding of what I had written took a mega leap forward. So I was always very happy that we had come together, and my own understanding of the world and of how it works increased my knowledge and my understanding, and it added a breadth of understanding to me that I had not had before. So I was always very grateful, first of all, that you had read the Phoenix program, then that you had read TDY and you liked my work and you promoted it. And through that, I came to understand a lot of things better, not just about my own life, but about how the government and the military are organized and operate. So, your father and your interest in your father and my interest in my father kind of brought us together. And Um, I feel like I owe both our fathers an obligation to speak about them today.
Well, thank you very much, Doug. I'm very touched by what you said. You and I spoke on my show a couple of times also, and I think it was actually on the show that I realized that Mr. Hammer might very well be my dad, and somehow between the two of us, we we kind of had a light bulb go off. Is it your firm opinion that the character Mr. Hammer was a real person, and that more likely than not, it was my father?
Oh, absolutely. I have no doubt. I did a lot of research into every aspect of the book TDY. At the time, I was in that I wrote the book. I was very involved in a personal level with a lot of guys who had been in the U.S. Army Special Forces and in the CIA, and that who had gone on these kind of missions. So I was able to corroborate everything that happened, and that the kind of security background checks that these people went through were standing operational procedure. The way the book unfolds is exactly how it happens. You get recruited by a personnel officer. He sends you to a military security officer, and then before everything gets okay, somebody who's in at the highest levels of counterintelligence in the U.S., in the military, who isn't there representing the organization itself, but somebody who's within the organization but overseeing it, does a check just to make sure that the military isn't screwing around with people too, because everybody's always screwing around with everybody in the government and the military, and you never really know exactly what's going on. So a person like Mr. Hammer would be absolutely crucial to have that kind of person involved in overseeing every kind of covert action or special activity that the military was conducting. Somebody from the FBI who had no illusions about the military, who had no illusions about the CIA as always being a force for good, who knew that these guys, had bureaucratic interests for launching covert operations that may not have anything to do to benefit the United States government, or the people of the United States, or might be unconstitutional, or could be compromised without the military, knowing what was going on. So it's absolutely makes sense that Mr. Hammer was a person exactly like your father, an FBI agent who was working for the military, who was overseeing and making sure that they weren't, messing around or crossing lines or being infiltrated by people who could blow an operation and embarrass government. Absolutely certain.
Thank you so much. My upstairs in I have a ring that I want to show you one day. It is a blue star sapphire ring set in gold that my father was given. I am told by, quote, a couple of guys, unquote. I'll never know who gave him that ring, but this is a typical Army Special Forces ring from that era. And your book records the Army Special Forces being involved in providing security for the TDY mission that you wrote about in your book TDY. There's many interesting parts of my dad's career that I'm trying to unfold by publishing my book about my dad. And this ring, I haven't told that story yet, so perhaps that'll have to go into a sequel. But it was a ring that was given to my dad, and he wore it at the Pentagon. But his superiors told him that he was not allowed to wear that ring. And so he took it off and gave it to his father. And when his father died, his father had it on his hand, and they were about to bury him with that ring on his hand. And I went to the funeral director and I said, no, I said, I want that ring. So I have had that Special Forces ring, which was given to my dad by a couple of guys, and we'll never know exactly who or why, but we do know that something is behind the story behind that. So I'd love to explore that a little bit with you someday. But Doug Valentine, you've been terrific this morning to share your thoughts about my father on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of his passing, and I'm sure that we'll be talking again soon. It's really, really an honor and a pleasure. Thank you, Doug.
You're very welcome. It was an honor for me to pay tribute to your father.
Superb. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you tonight.